Yes. Michelle, are you ready?
You're still alive.
Yes, I am. You have not come taken care of, but I managed to get my
All right, great.
Don't worry, Chris. Next time.
All right. 10 minutes, and if we're good.
We're starting already? Okay, good.
And I'm here. We've got a quorum plus.
All right. So, everyone, welcome this Wednesday, March 4th, 2015. Emeryville Economic Development Committee meeting is called to order at 12:04 p.m.
Tisk.
I know, sorry about that. Michelle, can you call roll, please?
Sure. Andrew Allen is excused. Ken Bukowski?
Here.
Philip Clark?
Here.
John Gooding? Kristen Hanks is excused. Stephen Keller?
Here.
Chris Owens?
Here.
Bill Reuter?
Here.
I'm Deb Sears. Mary Lou Fairclough is excused. And Councilmember Nora Davis.
Here.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from last time?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. All right, moving. Minutes passed. Jeff, welcome. Public comment. I noticed we have a few different guests today. If we could just go around and the guests just introduce yourselves real quickly. Let's start with you guys.
Hi, I'm John Hood, Relationship Manager from Wells Fargo in the Commercial Banking Group, and here just to kind of get a sense of what's going on and make some connections and see if there's anything we can do to help out.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Karen Flugie, also with Wells Fargo Commercial Lending, out of the Oakland office, head of business development for this region.
Great, thank you.
John Bowders, Policy Director of Housing California, member of the Housing League here in Emeryville.
Great, thank you.
Buzz Cardoza, Emeryville resident and planning commission member.
Great, thank you.
Sabrina Lander, the city manager.
Great.
Ken Bukowski, photographer.
Oh, Tim Sutherland, General Manager of the Watergate Community Association.
Betsy Foley, resident.
Great. And we have some more space at the table if you guys want to.
Yeah, there's
any of you
plenty
guys
of
want to come on over.
There's only one more committee member.
You will, however, turn around to look at the
Yeah.
presentation.
And any public comments?
The public comment is for items not on the agenda.
Correct. All right, moving on to action items.
Okay.
Michelle, you have a. She's ready.
So I have a Michelle de Guzman, Economic Development and Housing Division. I have a brief presentation. This is an abbreviated form of the presentation that was provided to the City Council on February 17th. It was done both by myself and Michael Dina, the Assistant City Attorney, who actually drafted the draft ordinance and made revisions based on the direction from the Council at the 17th meeting. So this presentation actually goes through and addresses the revised draft ordinance. So it's not the also the presentation we gave was nearly 45 minutes long, and we don't have quite the time for that. Oops. So just as a brief overview, there are existing wage policies in Emeryville now. One that we generally refer to as Measure C, which was passed in November 2005. It's actually codified in the Emeryville Municipal Code and has a different name that I don't recall off the top of my head. But Measure C essentially refers to compensation, workload, and protections in event of a management change, specifically to hotel employees only. And then also in place is the living wage, which went into place in 2006, and that applies again to a specific subset of employees. And that is full-time city employees, not part-time, not applying to part-time temporary employees. City contractors and recipients of financial assistance, any lessees, licensees, concessionaires, or franchisees of the city. For both of these, there is a minimum hourly compensation rate, and they are inclusive of a health benefit. And what that means is that there is a certain dollar amount that is paid, that plus the employer-paid health benefits have to equal the minimum compensation rate. For Measure C, that was initially $9 an hour. Every March, it is adjusted by the local CPI, and so it's currently, as of the first of this month, $11.39 an hour. And similarly, the living wage started at $11 an hour. It's adjusted annually on the fiscal year, and it is currently $14.03, and will be adjusted again on July 1st of this year. And its CPI is looking to be about 2.8%. So you'll see the estimate for July 1st of this year is $14.42 an hour. So very briefly, how the most recent activity on this is that at the January 20th council meeting, the council directed staff to develop a draft ordinance, and their direction was to base it on the Oakland Initiative, and that the initial minimum hourly wage rate be the same as the city's living wage rate. That would be effective as of July 1st, 2015, which again is that $14.42 that I mentioned. And to note the difference between that, the living wage rate includes a health care benefit, and the minimum wage rate does not. It's just to use the $14.42 as the number. And that the ordinance would be effective as of July 1st, 2015. And so on February 17th, the staff brought this draft ordinance, as drafted by the city attorney's office, to the city council. And they provided additional direction on that draft ordinance, since it was largely based on the Oakland Initiative. And it included phase-in, which is a sort of a reduced step phase-in of the minimum wage for small businesses and nonprofits, as well as some revisions that needed to be made as a result of AB 1522, which is state legislation that was passed that relates to sick leave provisions. The Oakland Initiative had various sick leave provisions because it goes into effect before AB 1522, which goes into effect July 1st of this year. So this addresses, there were some things that needed to be addressed relative to that. And this table is just to give you a sense of where the proposed rate fits in with the other citywide minimum wage rates that are out there. I know it's not terribly visible, but the green line is the proposal from Emeryville, the starting at $14.42 and then moving up based on annualized CPI. That red line you see immediately below it is San Francisco. San Francisco, in their minimum wage proposal that passed in November, has several specified step increases up through 2018. Their goal was to achieve $15 per hour by 2015, and then thereafter it goes by CPI. So again, that's why you see it has the same slope. The blue is Oakland, and that starts at $12.25 and goes up by CPI. And the sort of yellowish orange one is Berkeley, and essentially theirs went up in October of last year. And will go up again at the beginning of 2016 to essentially the $12.25 rate. And then they have no further increases set after 2016. However, it is noted that their Labor Commission is already has approved for consideration by their city council some revisions to their minimum wage ordinance, which includes potentially tagging it to their to a similar rate as their living wage, including a health benefit. And then the purple one is San Jose, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale. San Jose has had theirs for several years. Mountain View and Sunnyvale passed a minimum wage to match San Jose's. And that just shows that sort of what those cities have done to work as a region. And then the one at the bottom is the state minimum wage, which is slated to go up. It went up to $9 an hour in 2015. It's slated to go up to $10 an hour in 2016. And no further increases are anticipated thereafter. AB 1522, as I noted, is a paid sick leave law that was passed last November by the signed into law by the governor. It becomes effective July 1st. It identifies several different aspects. I don't want to go into too much because it was quite extensive, but and essentially all employees working within the state of California will ultimately be covered by this. And the role of our minimum wage ordinance was to ensure that anything in it was not complied with this. However, the key point of this is really the last bullet, which is AB 1522 is a floor and not a ceiling, so the city may adopt regulations allowing for expanded benefits. And that comes to play later on in the actual ordinance. Maximum usable hours, exemptions, and those sort of things all come into play in the draft ordinance.
Real quick question on that, if we go back. So what I'm reading on the fourth bullet, maximum usable hours, so the person can only use up to 3 days of sick leave a year?
That's right. That's the one of the quirks about the way AB 1522 is drafted. If you can see from the slide, the bullet point below that, maximum hours accrued, an employee may accumulate up to 48 hours of paid sick leave each year, but they can only use only 24 of those hours per year.
So if you have surgery and you have to take a week off, 2 of those days are unpaid.
Well, that's the minimum, right?
Right.
The employer
So I'm just working from the baseline.
Yeah, so that's, yes, I mean, you're right to point out that's an anomaly of the way that the statute is drafted.
So to summarize our draft ordinance, these are, as you saw and you received in your packet, these are sort of the main points of the draft ordinance. That it has an effective date of July 1st, 2015. There is a phase-in period for small businesses and nonprofits, which essentially puts them at a lower rate on July 1st. 6 months later, they go slightly higher, and then 6 months after that, they meet whatever the current citywide minimum wage will be. And that the wage rate is the $14.42, increased annually by the CPI. And that does not include a healthcare credit, and it does not include a credit for tip income as well. So employers cannot provide a lower wage rate and have that rate meet the city's minimum through tip income. It defines a covered employee, anyone that would be covered by this ordinance, as someone who works at least 2 hours per calendar week within the city and qualifies for payment of the minimum wage under state law. And there is no exemption for the size or type of employer. So nonprofits, small businesses, no one is exempt from this. And small businesses, which relates to the phase-in, are defined as those businesses with 10 or fewer employees. The draft ordinance also addresses the sick leave, as we mentioned, and it treats in many ways the AB 1522 as that floor. So it's similar, 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. There is a cap. Small businesses can cap the accrual rate to 48 hours per year, whereas all other employers is capped at 72 hours per year. Sick leave use, this goes back to what Stephen had noted. The city's ordinance has no limits as to the use. You can use up to your accrued number of hours. You can use them for yourself, for a family member, or for a designee. That first bullet identifies what a family member is, and that actually comes from AB 1522. And then if a person does not have any of those family members, they may also designate an individual, and they may change that designation annually. And that comes from the Oakland ordinance.
Michelle, sorry to interrupt, just a clarification. Actually, the designated individual only comes into play if the employee doesn't have a spouse or domestic partner. So if you do not have a spouse or domestic partner, you may designate an individual for whom you can take paid sick leave to provide health care for, or for their health care. As Michelle said, that designated individual piece is not in AB 1522 state law. It was in the Oakland initiative, which council had directed us to model the Emeryville ordinance from. Sorry.
Oh, really? And then similar to AB 1522, you can use, employees may begin to use their sick leave the 90th day after their employment, or the 90th day after the start of the ordinance, if they have not been accruing sick leave and only begin on July 1st of the ordinance. And then also the draft ordinance includes some revisions to Measure C, because there's some changes that are required as a result of having both of those work together. It also includes a hospitality service charge component. Service charges are those charges that are collected by a service employer for service provided by employees who actually perform the service. So, and this excludes managerial employees. So what this really means is, you know, say you get something, if you go to a restaurant and you have a large party and they put a service charge on your bill, or if there's a catering, usually service charges are some percentage of the bill. That percentage service charge needs to be distributed to the employees who perform the service. It can't be absorbed as additional cost or additional revenue by the company to be distributed however the company wants. It needs to go to the employees. The draft ordinance has that, and it does not apply to tips, sort of the tips that you write in at the end of your bill, or gratuities. It's this specific service charge. And at the time when we were first looking at drafting the draft ordinance, we did request from Lift Up some additional clarification on how to deal with this hospitality service charge, because there have been questions that were raised, particularly by restaurants in Oakland, about potentially using that as a way to distribute paying some of the higher wages to the so-called back of the house, who typically receive the service charge directly. And so Lift Up proposed this language, which I won't read in detail, but is also called out in the packet in the staff report. So we can go back and discuss that a little bit further. And this just sort of goes through the implementation and enforcement of how we go about doing that. The city is able to adopt regulations to implement and enforce the ordinance, and complaints to the city and city enforcement. The city may investigate and pursue any remedies based on employee reporting of violations. But that does not preclude that an employee may also pursue a private right of action for violation of the ordinance. And just briefly what the changes are to Measure C. So this is just a quick summary of Measure C. I only identified in the initial summary minimum compensation. There's actually a couple other compensation rules under Measure C. There's minimum hourly compensation. There's a minimum average compensation by all employees of the hotel to ensure that there's not too large a spread among the various employees, as well as the rate of pay for managerial employees. And so those are the rates that when they first went in place and where they are currently. And in order to, there need to be adjustments to the minimum compensation and average compensation to reconcile Measure C and the proposed draft ordinance. And those would result here. So that the minimum compensation would rise to the $14.32 an hour. The average would then become $17.65, and a managerial employee, actually, I don't recall, was that a minimum or an average, that managerial employee?
That's the minimum. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that would be then the $80,000.
And can help me understand, how do you get to the average?
This was essentially, the average was a rate that was calculated, that was adopted by the voters as part of Measure C. It was set as a baseline in the initiative.
I guess it's the question, you're captained by, there's all the employees who aren't managerial, you average their hourly wage rate?
Right.
That's the,
yeah.
So that theoretically there have to be people paid more than the minimum.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there could be people paid more, but that not everybody is paid the minimum.
So that ordinance also regulates the amount you can pay to a manager in a private hotel?
No, it's minimum for a manager.
Oh, minimum for a manager, okay.
And this is just a brief summary of the fiscal impacts of this ordinance. In this fiscal year, staff estimated about $35,000 for education and outreach materials, posters, notifications. And then from the next fiscal year and ongoing, administration and enforcement, we estimated at about $125,000 a year. And that's for an FTE. That's an estimate for an FTE employee, which may or may not be a city employee or a contract employee. As well as there are some staff that currently are below this minimum wage. And the reason they've not applied to the citywide living wage is because these are the part-time temporary staff, primarily in the community services department. So in order to bring those wages up to meet that, it would be approximately $80,000 a year. So ongoing, it would be an additional cost of about $205,000 a year with, of course, annual CPI adjustments. Currently those costs are all not budgeted, and so some action would be needed to be taken in order to budget for those additional costs. Almost done. The implementation timelines is based on the council direction to move forward with implementation by July 1st. On the 17th, as I noted, we provided a draft ordinance, and all businesses received this package essentially that you received. It's been posted on the website. We're discussing it now. On the 7th, the City Council will consider the community input that we've received so far at a study session. And then it's anticipated that the 2 meetings in May will be for the first and second reading of the ordinance. And then June will be spent doing all of the administrative work associated with preparing for the ordinance, and it would go into effect July 1st. So the big questions that we staff would like some direction on from the economic or input from the Economic Development Committee are first, should the proposed language from Lift Up be included in the final ordinance? What are the potential impacts on various types of businesses and workers? Are there other exemptions that should be brought for consideration? Internships and job training, particularly those that might be provided by nonprofits or government entities, for youth, for 25 years or older, younger. Appropriate definition of small businesses. So that 10 or fewer employees was taken from the Oakland ordinance, but if there's a different threshold that would be appropriate. And also any discussion about the proposed implementation timeline. And I would like to note the reason that those particular consideration are in there is, I believe it was Berkeley and Richmond.
Yeah, so Berkeley and Richmond, I believe, Mountain View as well, provide carve-out exemptions in their minimum wage for internships, job training, particularly for youth. So the Berkeley ordinance, for example, specifically exempts from the minimum wage youth, as defined as persons under 25 years of age, who are taking place in some sort of job training program that is run by a nonprofit or governmental organization. So that is an example. We have received comment letters from members of the public that have asked for consideration of an exception to the minimum wage provision applying to internship programs, whether they be for youth or non-youth. But it's a further discussion point. And one that would be helpful for bringing back to the City Council for their consideration when they're thinking of drafting the final ordinance. So we can define internships in various ways, whether they be for internships with for-profit businesses or non-profit businesses, and we can also include whether youth should be included as part of a category of exemption. So that's another question that we're posing to the committee.
So I just have a question. The questions don't include the big one intentionally?
Well, yeah,
I mean, it's sort of a curious omission. Is that intentional?
What's the big question?
How much should it be? And
well, you're welcome to discuss anything that you wish.
Okay, but I mean, it's funny that just isn't up there. But anyway.
Our goal as a committee, obviously, it's an action item. We want to review, we want input from others, and hopefully we'll have some key points that we want to let staff know, as well as let the council know that we feel is important for Emeryville and for businesses and economic development. That said, I know there's a lot to digest. Everyone has opinions, I'm guessing, and we want to get through it. So please, I want to try to recognize everyone. Make your points. If you're going on, I'm going to try to sort of get context so we can make sure everyone can get heard.
Bill, could
yes.
we hear from the public first, so
Great
the
idea.
members of the committee could hear what the public has to say?
Okay. I know, Tim, you have some, I know, and we'll go work around as well.
Yeah, I just, one thing, and thank you for having this meeting. This is very important. It's a legacy decision and it impacts quality of life for employees and homeowners in Emeryville. Question is, how are nonprofit mutual benefit corporations being treated? You know, Park Plaza, Watergate, Emery Bay Village. They're not pure 501(c)(3)s. They're only taxed on membership income, so it's more of a 501(c)(7). And those are nonprofit mutual benefit corporations, so I wonder how that'll be treated. The other piece is, this is more of a labor balloon payment, unbudgeted for homeowner associations that employ workforces to maintain their vast common areas. And the impact to Watergate, the first year is $99,134.43, and that's without any compression issues, which will invariably occur. Also, the last piece is Watergate is the only union HOA in Emeryville. Union shops, we've negotiated labor agreements with unions over 40 years. And I would hope that, like the city had offsets for healthcare, Watergate pays per union employee $5.80 per hour for healthcare benefits for the employee and their whole family. And so that, I think, is part of the overall compensation for hourly employees that I would like at least some discussion or at least some credit for or analysis on. And the other issue is, in talking to the unions, they see no benefit in waiving the MWO because it's a new floor. So it's very difficult to get the unions once we are into a new contract agreement. They're going to take the $14.42 an hour plus CPI as the new starting point for negotiations. And the $5.80 an hour they've negotiated over 40 years for healthcare, they do not want to have that as a takeaway. So this really pushes up permanently the cost of operating common interest developments in Emeryville. And so I'm not speaking for the board or the community other than this is a balloon payment on wages, and I read the San Francisco and Oakland ordinance and how you treat nonprofits. And that seems more like an easily digestible or easier to digest incremental increase, so we can adjust the labor budgets and the contracts at Watergate intelligently and prudently, factoring in the high cost of healthcare that we're gladly paying our employees.
Thank you, Jim. And just for clarification, you mentioned compression. I know you explained it to me a little earlier, but that's, in essence, you have a scale of people right now starting from 10 to 17. If you move it up, the base moves up to 14, ultimately now you're looking at 14 to 21. Right. And that'll have a significant additional cost.
On all the other employees that aren't adjusted. So the number I gave you for the first year at $99,000, almost $100,000 the first year, doesn't take into account the invariable compression issues that'll occur with all the other employees that aren't lifted up.
Chair, I have a question for her, just real quickly. On the medical contribution that you guys make, the 5 whatever, and you say, you know, they're not willing to give that up. But isn't that a negotiating point when you guys negotiate?
Well, it is.
It's not a given.
Right, but keep in mind that you have 2 people on the negotiating table now. You have the homeowners, and now you have the city and the union, because the city has now lifted up the minimum starting point for all positions in the union. And they have negotiated, and they've already said, why should we have to give, it's not our fault the city raised the minimum on you. Why should we have to give away what we've negotiated in good faith over 40 years? And I think the city has a, for their living wage ordinance, you guys have an offset for healthcare paid. Will that apply for the city on the MWO as well? So the city will not have offsets either.
Not in the minimum wage ordinance, so.
So it's just, I think when you consider a living wage or minimum wage, I don't think everybody pays almost $6 an hour for full health care for the employees and their family. And so I think at least the homeowners in associations or other businesses that take very good care of their employees, keep in mind the employees decided over 40 years that they would forego bigger hourly wage increases because they wanted to put it all into health care. This totally negates 40 years, and it takes that big number they got and now it pushes the salary, and so they permanently raised that number.
A quick question.
Yeah.
How many workers at Watergate are under $14 an hour?
I'll give you the exact number.
And how many employees overall, if you can also tell us?
So we have 33, and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 of the 33. So the lift up, that's what the lift up causes.
Are those workers folks in the service area, or are they groundsmen and so forth?
It's the grounds, it's all the people that do the custodial grounds, maintenance, and paint. But they all get they get $6.36 an hour in healthcare costs. The security guards get $4.04. So the unions have been very strict on, they want most of their compensation increases over 40 years put into the healthcare costs. That's why it's such an inordinately high number. $6.36 per hour for the unions that do the grounds work is a very, very fair number, and the homeowners and the board have been very generous. This just upsets that allocation. Thank you.
More public comments? Yep.
Well, I'll just comment on the health insurance issue. Initially, I didn't really even see it as an issue, but after I sort of read all the detailed information, I did see that it affects Watergate in particular disproportionately. But for employees to get health insurance paid by the employer, that means that the employee doesn't have to pay taxes on that. If they were receiving it as income, they would have to pay income taxes on it. And while medical expenses are deductible in 2014 and 2015, they're only deductible to the extent of anything over 10% of the, what was the, you probably know.
It's over 10% of your
adjusted income or whatever. But so you can't even, so it's not like if you're paying $5,000, you can't deduct $5,000. Right. You can only deduct maybe $1,000 or, so that's a benefit to the employee to have it paid by the employer. The other thing is that I've had this mentioned by several people is that apparently a number of the school students have been employed, have found employment in the Emeryville area, and which is a great way for them to earn some extra money. But if they're in competition now with people who are, if jobs are paying $14.42 an hour to start, they're going to be competing with other people who will be coming in from the outside who, they can't make that money in Richmond, for example. So there's going to be a much larger pool of applicants, and it's going to be difficult for young people to get jobs, to get starter jobs. And so I think that you might consider that as a possible exemption.
Thank you. Very good points. And can you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Yeah, my name is Chris Hilliard. I own Farley's on 65th Street. As I said at the last city council meeting, it's our position. We have a business in Oakland and one in San Francisco as well. And as you all know, Measure FF went into effect on Monday, and so we pay everyone $12.25 in Oakland now. And we raised our Emeryville employees to $12.25 as well because we believe there should be a consistent regional minimum wage. It doesn't make sense to have Emeryville having a $2 plus minimum wage above the surrounding cities, one being San Francisco, which is arguably the most expensive city in the country. So, as I said at the meeting, a consistent regional minimum wage makes the most sense from a business owner perspective, but I also think from a city perspective as well. And I can tell you all our employees are happy to be making $12.25. I was speaking with one yesterday and she said, I heard Emeryville was thinking about $14.42. Don't get me wrong, but that's just crazy. She's like, she realizes that the small businesses can't afford it, basically. My concern with this is small businesses, they're not gonna open in Emeryville. Like, if I was faced with opening a business one block over in Oakland, I would never choose Emeryville if I have to pay them $2.20 cents more per hour just to be in Emeryville where it's much less expensive. In the restaurant industry, over 35% of our expenses are tied to labor, and so when you impact that as significantly as this is, it's not feasible for small businesses. And so the other question on there about how to define a small business, I know Measure FF said 10 employees, so I have 12. I own a cafe, but I'm not a small business, so definitely I think we have to look really hard at what a small business is. I think 10 as the definition of a small business, you won't find that anywhere other than in the Measure FF definition. So it doesn't seem realistic to me either.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken.
Right. I'm going to get myself on camera here. I have a couple questions. The first one is, if the neighboring cities have just adopted new minimum wage laws, why don't we wait a year and see how that pans out before we jump, that we automatically got to do this on July 1st and do everything in a real rush? So that's a concern. And the other concern is that there's no ability for the city council to grant an exemption. The only exemption under the draft ordinance is provided for a collective bargaining agreement. Well, if anybody wants an exemption, they can come in and ask for it and tell us why they want an exemption. So I think the council should retain that power. And then Emeryville is small enough that you can look at every individual business. Why do we have to do the blanket approach like we do in the neighboring cities? So I think council should retain the power to grant exemptions. And then on the tipped employees, I mean, I heard comments at the meeting the other night that tips aren't a reliable source of income. And if you're a waiter in a good restaurant, that's what you're really working for. You're not even working for the wage. So I think it's unfair not to include the tipped income with the salary when you're doing this consideration. I mean, if the IRS considers that to be income, then so should the ordinance. Because otherwise they're going to get a double whammy. They're going to get a raise, and then their salary will be won't include the tip. So the employer is going to get a heavy burden. And these are service businesses that we all enjoy. So I think we're going to be killing that. So we're going to have a community meeting on March 16th to solicit opinions and get to provide some more information about this. March 16th at 5:30 at the Ralph Poly School at 61st Street and Doyle. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Chris, if I could, raising your wages up a couple dollars, what is the impact? Obviously, you're either absorbing it in your bottom line, or at some point you're pushing it up and raising prices.
Yeah.
How has that math gone for you, or how does that work out?
When we raised our wage to $12.25, prices went up 10 to 15%. And that was on Monday. And so if it goes up to $14.42, it's another approximately 10%. And obviously, I don't know what the net impact of that will be when all the customers, at some point, I mean, they're happy for the employees that they know that are getting a higher wage, but at some point, they want their $6 Subway sandwich. And
Phil, could we ask Chris, what's your definition of a small business?
I've seen 49 as a number that seems
Where'd you see
reasonable.
that?
I think Obamacare's 49.
Yeah, I think that's what it was from there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Comments?
Well,
yes.
A certain tone has been set here, and appropriately, hearing from folks who would be affected by a boost to 1442. Whether that will ever happen or not remains to be seen. If I read it correctly, and Nora, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and you certainly have done that in the past, so it seemed to me the City Council put the hard draft out in order to elicit comments from the affected people.
This is not set in stone.
Nothing is set in stone.
Everybody has to understand that. You're absolutely right.
That seems to me that's a very important thing. And there's room for a lot of flexibility. But let's not forget that historically, the minimum wages in the United States, nationally, in the state, and most especially in the Bay Area, haven't even come close to staying in tune with the cost of living. And a boost in the living wage, or the minimum wage here in town, is not a bad thing at all. We should keep that clearly in mind while we're working our way through the minefield of problems and details. I just wanted to get that said clearly out front.
Yeah, Jeff.
I agree with you, and I think it's the details that matter.
Right.
Many people are looking at this. trying to look at it bigger picture beyond it should be increased is how much and in what way. And I think Emeryville and its neighboring cities have done a really good job thinking more regionally and not I can win if you lose and vice versa, and everyone's going to benefit from thinking regionally. I appreciate hearing council talking about, if Oakland has police problems, there are problems because we don't have an electronic fence at the border and we have to think regionally with those ways. So here, I think there's a lot of merit in trying to have a cohesive approach so you aren't doing things like you've just mentioned and encouraging people to look one block away. This is a very tiny town, so for people who make choices, it's not hard to operate. If we were Houston, Texas, 330 square miles, hard to get outside. Very easy to get outside here. One of the questions for feedback is what do small businesses think, and we house a lot of those small businesses in ground floor spaces, and I don't want to speak for any of them directly, but the general vibe that I'm hearing is it will impact them not dissimilarly than what you've dimensioned. I think if they're really forced to, they would say this does need to be addressed to some degree, and probably many of them would deal with it like you, like, okay, I'm going to boost everyone 20%. Do I need to go 50% in Emeryville? That starts being material enough that they have pause. I just look at the big picture, and we want to encourage smaller businesses, whether they're defined as 10 or something different, and sort of what I think of as street retail, locally serving retail is the general plan term. And that's hard to do if you don't listen to their feedback. So big picture, I think it's good to do something. I'd like to see it more cohesive over a larger area than this 1 square mile.
So it's hard to make a comment following on what both Jeff and Bill said. I've talked to a lot of people since this has started, and the sense I get overall is that I have yet to run into anyone who is against raising the minimum wage. What they're concerned about is the process, the hustle, and the idea of fitting in regionally. But I have heard no one say they're against raising the minimum wage. So if we accept that as a basis, then that kind of informs what the conversation is going to be. No one, almost no one, I'll probably find somebody who's against it. But I think the consensus in the community is we understand we want to raise the minimum wage, but we want to do it properly, we want to do it with good process, and we want to have it equalized sub-regionally. We're talking the East Bay 80 corridor here. So that's all I'm going to say right now.
2 comments. First of all, in regards to my immediate homeowners association, we're not affected by it. Everybody in our association makes more than that, and we're not in a union. Lucky us, but we have people that have worked for 20, 30 years and they get paid well, we take care of them. So that part of it we're not affected by, so I'm real happy about that, and I feel really sorry for Watergate, so that is a problem for them. Then secondly, from a planning point of view, since we have over the years insisted on every project having a little retail component on there for a small business over the years, why are we now trying to say to these small business, we want you here, but you can't afford to be here? I think that's sort of a real contradiction in purpose, and I so much agree with you, and I love your sandwiches, by the way. and you're only half a block away from Oakland, I mean, the very next building is in Oakland. So
You're not even half a block there, right?
It's 25 feet, guys.
Well, the next building, yeah. What I'm saying is it's contradictory to what we're trying to accomplish with economic development on the one hand, so let's try and get closer to our neighbors.
Well, and so collectively, it sounds like impact to small business, and we have a few, but significant. Potentially, if we went all the way to 1442, it could be a 20 to 25% increase in U4 retail prices, which ultimately, yes, if you're 25 feet away and someone opens up right next door to you, that's a significant difference in whether you'll get the business or next door. And obviously other, businesses. How do we equate small businesses? We've heard one suggestion of suggesting it be less than 50, 49. You know, the other thing I think that we're trying to figure out how to address is the health insurance being rolled in, right? Emeryville has the living wage, and it seems contradictory that if there's a living wage established in Emeryville, that the minimum wage doesn't actually use some of the same parameters that the living wage does. Because this is in essence saying, I see this ordinance as, take the living wage and make that the minimum wage, but don't count actually things we count in the living wage. And that is just problematic on an implementation standpoint, I think. So we, you know, how do we address that, or how do we suggest that? And I guess one thing I'd suggest is we recommend to council first looking at mirroring the highest of either San Francisco or Oakland, so we're actually on par with them, and second, you know, counting insurance or counting how we're doing the living wage, those kind of parameters that might make it easier to manage for employers.
On that remark, I'd like to agree with Nora on one question I had is I don't understand how we came to a number that's higher than San Francisco. San Francisco is regional to us, but it's an island unto itself, and we can't be higher than them. They are the most expensive area in the region. So as Nora says, we need to stay with the East Bay corridor along I-80 or whatever that's defined as. So I think and I agree, we need to look regionally instead. We're too small to set a precedent of being the highest paid place in here, because Actual Cafe or Tribu Cafe is right down the street from it. And if they're charging $5 less for a meal than Farley's is, we're not going to attract the businesses we want in the marketplace. The marketplace is going to look for unique, smaller businesses. And same with Sherman-Williams. Everyone wants smaller serving businesses. Those businesses aren't going to be able to afford to pay their employees here, so they're going to go just on the other side of I-8 or 580 or the other side of San Pablo Street and open their businesses there, and we're going to be the losers. So I think regionally we need to look at keeping our minimum wage in conjunction with Berkeley and Oakland and Piedmont, if there is one there, or Albany, but in the East Bay. So I think that's the direction we need to go.
One thought, we've had that drumbeat that Emeryville needs to make some statements.
We can make a statement by agreeing
I
to
agree,
do
it might be the wrong statement to make, but we definitely be in the news for this.
I just want to make a comment that I think the Economic Development Committee should realize. In Emeryville, if we pass this as an ordinance, changing the ordinance is not a big deal. You can adjust when things happen, unlike Oakland, which was a vote of the people. Now, was Berkeley a vote of the people or by ordinance?
It was by ordinance.
See, there's more flexibility there. We have to keep that in mind as we go down this path. We have the flexibility to you know, adapt and change to when things happen. So we should understand that as an economic development committee.
Yeah, I think that's material. You
it's
can
very
look
important.
at it every year if you
That's
wanted
right.
to. I mean,
that's right.
I would say you brought it up, Phil. Historically, I think Emeryville's valued from marching to its own drum and being a positive voice about concepts and beliefs and so forth. I think there are ways to do it that might be more effective than just this, because this does, I think, to the general public seem like people were acting with other people's money. You know, I would much rather see if the city wants to continue its sort of progressive character. There are plenty of ways to do it. Certainly, sticking with the East Bay and moving with them, I have trouble discounting that as progressive, right? I mean, I don't think you need to say, I need to be more progressive, right? This is all really progressive, and if you compared it to a whole bunch of the rest of the country, really materially so. So I hope it's not a competition for look at me and do the, you know, you can do the right thing. That's most important than the sort of accolades or attention, I think.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, Stephen, Bill, then Stephen.
I agree. I would just say one other thing. Nothing wrong with being just a little ahead of the curve. Make it stand out. I like the idea of a regional approach. I like the line that many union representatives have been taking on this issue, namely, try to get to $15 an hour by 2018 and make it a regional push for that target. That makes sense to me. Remember, again, historically, the minimum wage has just not even kept anywhere near the increase in the cost of living. And we have been generous to big businesses in town. We have been less generous in some ways to smaller businesses. We haven't paid a hell of a lot of attention at all to the people who do the scut work for hourly wages in town.
The union, if I can ask a question, the union position, what is their opinion about the health care that we've heard about?
You know, I'm not an expert on their position in that, so I won't try to answer.
I can tell you my two unions do not believe in takeaways. They've negotiated fairly over 40 years. The reason why Park Plaza is not affected but Watergate is, there's a union, and that's fine. We're glad to have them. And there's no problem with that, but we pay a higher per hour healthcare rate than Park Plaza. So when Park Plaza is not affected, but Watergate is, that shouldn't be. Because the unions have asked for the majority of their compensation increases over 40 years to go into healthcare. So Watergate shouldn't be affected either. When you take the total compensation we pay our employee, it's the same as Park Plaza. But they've emphasized more of a higher wage than an hourly healthcare. Watergate's done the opposite because the unions have pushed that. So they've said under no circumstances take away on already negotiated healthcare hourly rates.
That on the national level is, by the
I don't know on a
way,
national level, but
with the unions too.
Yeah, yeah.
With
They
them,
will
it's
not
gonna
take away
after
healthcare.
Obamacare because they have these Cadillac plans. So it's an issue all the way around.
And that's why I think the ordinance should be finessed to take that into account. It's not fair to the Watergate homeowners who are paying a very high health care wage at the request of the unions to be penalized when Park Plaza has put more, and rightly so, because that's what they wanted, into higher wages. They should both be treated equally.
Michelle and Mike, does Berkeley and Oakland have a living wage similar to Emeryville, and is it the same? Is it the 1402 or 03, or they're calculating it differently in those towns?
Oakland has a living wage.
And what do you know
And
the
they have
number?
a credit, it's around 14, I don't know, 24 or something.
Yeah.
So it's a little over 14, and they give a fixed credit for health insurance if the employer is paying it. I think it's around $1.25, $1.50, somewhere around there.
Okay.
But it isn't the actual amount the employer is paying. It's they set a specific credit.
It's like an allocation. Just
Yeah, Bill,
Okay, yeah.
I'd like to get back to the point Chris made because I think it's critically important to the small businesses that we should really encourage the council to analyze and see if they are doing no harm to Farley and the rest of the small businesses that we cherish in this town. We want to lift the minimum wage, but we don't want to have a coup de grace here on good old small businesses. So I would hope that the Economic Development Committee would support that be very careful, whatever steps you take, that you measure what the harm would be to the very small business.
Yes,
Well, I think part of my comments I was wanting to make was that I think part of what this committee should recommend is that we ask council to slow down. That they forget their target date of July 1st. This is way too important of a decision to make. There's too many nuances that have just come up. I don't know if the council's really considered these kind of things. And that by trying to push this, I understand the new council wants to move something forward. They want to see that what they ran on their campaigns for, they're going to come through it. But they don't have to do that within their first 6 months seated on council. So I'd like part of our recommendations that they slow down, move their target date to complete so they can look at all these things. Because this is far too important to just push through and say, we want this done on the first and see whatever we have to do. Because we all realize that raising wages raises the spendability that people have to put in the economy. So we all agree with that, we all want that. But we feel that their rate that they're looking at 1442 is high. It's high in San Francisco, it's high by the rest. So they need to look at that. They need to look how nonprofits like Watergate are going to be affected, how medical payments are going to be affected. These are far too complex to look at and have them and voted into place by July 1st. So I would like to, part of our recommendations committee, to say they slow down another day and just make that really clear to them.
So if I'm here for you, you're making a motion that we support and we feel that this committee feels it's important to raise the minimum wage. Second, it's important that we take into account the small businesses and the other community members affected, so therefore there should not be a July 1st target date for implementation because there's not enough input at this time.
Because they need to evaluate what a small business is. I don't think 10 employees is correct. I think it's higher than that.
Could you add more study sessions?
Very good. Jeff,
Well,
I seem to have heard that recently.
I agree with you, Stephen, to some degree. I would feel, I mean, I'm not making the decision. I'm contributing to the discussion, but I'm not making the decision. But the more the decision mirrored things that have already been discussed and vetted in other communities, the more comfortable I am moving it faster. And there is some degree of, you can study forever, people are focused, and one of the challenges is small businesses need to focus on being in business, and they can't come to lots of meetings. I mean, that's a cost to business.
So you bet.
And it's very hard to engage in the public dialogue actively over a long period of time. So I would, you want to hear voices, but spreading it out may not get more voices at the table.
That's not why I want them to spread it out. I want them to spread it out so they can take the time and look at all these nuances, because I think the healthcare thing is a very, very big deal. And they are not looking at the options that other communities have used. The information's out there. They need to apply it. If they can do that by July 1st, I think that's fine. I think that's a big push on staff to get all that put together for them. So
well, I don't disagree. Those are the things that, to me, make sense to look at, for sure.
Michelle, the Emeryville living wage, how much does it account or credit for health insurance?
It doesn't have it's not specific with respect to health insurance. They're just
that it's counted.
Yes, that it's counted.
So, for example, in Emeryville's perspective, the Watergate, they're paying
$5.80 per union employee.
Right. So
per hour.
So 15 to 20 something per employee would be what they'd be seeing.
If they had a contract with the city.
If they had a contract with the city.
living wage is very specific.
Oh, only for
yeah. So that's why.
But looking at that as a model.
Yeah. Well, I'm just the living wage is just a dollar amount. That's why I was sort of making that point. That dollar amount, but the living wage is a very specific thing. In Berkeley and Oakland, and a lot of cities have a living wage, but that's a specific thing. That is generally speaking for employees of the city and for anybody who contracts with the city for a variety of reasons.
Right.
And so that's very particular. So I believe Berkeley and Oakland both specify a dollar amount that can be applied for health benefits, right? Is that correct?
For
under the living wage.
Under the living wage.
Yeah. But both of them, which have minimum wage ordinances, do not have a health benefit component for their minimum wage ordinances.
But their minimum wages are a few dollars less than their living wage.
Yes, yes.
So
yes, they are not the same.
It's factored in.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't say it's factored in, but it's just different. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a little confusing because they're using the same rate, but I just sort of don't want the two things to get confused. Okay. But they could be, you could include a health benefit.
Right.
On slowing down to get it right, that's not a bad rough and ready idea, but it can't be a slowdown that goes on for very, very long. There are a lot of people working in this town who are just barely making it, 2 or 3 jobs, trying to hold it all together, have it all hang together. They need some relief. And as I've said, we've tried to give relief to some of our larger businesses. We try to pay attention to smaller businesses, although I think we're a little scattier and not quite as good at that as we should be. But we need to take care of the folks who come in to do the tough jobs in town on an hourly wage. So I'm a little leery of saying, well, let's just dump that deadline without having some deadline down the road that will keep our eye on the target here.
But then to counter that, in the meantime, you're doing the opposite to the small businesses. They are not coming into town because they don't know what our prices are going to be. So we would like to get it settled now so we know to make a decision as to whether or not we're coming here. And most of the people you're talking about, the grunt work, they mostly work for the hotels. They already have. They are not really a part of this, right? Because Measure C takes care of that, doesn't it?
This will supersede.
There's a lot of people.
This will supersede. It's going to change Measure C. So unions that have negotiated, for example, the healthcare, as we heard from Tim, if the healthcare is negotiated at, call it $5 an hour, and they have a wage of $12 an hour, their wage goes up to 14. So effectively, they'd be at 19 if you're looking at total cost for the employer. So, do we have any motions?
Could I ask Stephen to amend his motion to include intensifying outreach between now and July 1, including more study sessions, so people really understand what the nature of this ordinance is?
I'm just concerned that doing that is going to do what we're talking about. Is like Jeff has said, it's going to add too much complexity, too much layers. And I don't want to put this off for 6 months. I understand they're trying to hit the fiscal year target, is what council's trying to do. You know, I would like to see this pushed back to July, September, August, September, something like that, just to allow. And with that date extended, I see more community meetings being put out there if there's a couple months added. But trying to put those community meetings within the July deadline, I think is really tight.
Can I make a suggestion?
No, you
Want to
can
talk
make
to
a
yours?
substitute motion.
Okay, substitute
without-
motion that
Thank
we recommended council, there are more formal public comment opportunities created, and leave it to them if they can get that done before July 1 or not. That we think that's essential. I mean, I get it, it may not be able to happen. But let's see if, you know, that way you're not saying we don't believe you can do it, but we want more input so people have the opportunity, because I'm sure, you know, we're going to reach out to the people, the equivalent of Farley's businesses, and just make sure they know the next opportunities to do it, because we're just becoming aware ourselves. And I don't know what they'll think, but I want to, yeah, but.
I just want to, Michelle maybe mentioned this in the front, but we sent out over 3,000 letters Friday and Monday to everybody who's registered with a business license in town. And I will tell you that we are finally starting to hear from people, you know, ones that went out there. And, you know, we've been compiling all of these comment letters. We're hearing from, I think almost everybody that's written in has been a small business that I've seen. So we're going to be putting all of that out there, at, you know, for the public and the council and the study session on the 7th. So,
I received one of those, and I appreciated that, but it was just the ordinance.
Right.
And I like to think, I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm not the dumbest either. You know, that ordinance is hard, there's a lot of Greek.
Yeah.
This package and the you know, the package, the council, you know, report, what do you call it? I don't know, whatever, staff report, is a whole bunch more helpful to me. And that hasn't gone out yet, you know. And I think a lot of people would appreciate that sort of what you've done here, and the nature of hearing real people say things, you know, I mean, I appreciate the outreach is there,
but you're right.
It's an ordinance, and it's
So that's a substitute motion.
Yes.
So what's your substitute motion? Is it still?
Well, we recommended, I guess there was, you know, already in there that you want,
You want me to try for you, Jeff?
Yeah.
all those things you said, but not delaying it, but shoving more public comment in.
maybe
Well,
not
I think
absolutely.
one clear thing would be, we need to strongly request that the council have staff send out a 1 or 2 page summary to all the business, not just the ordinance, because you won't get reasonable comments from people that, you know, yeah, a small business gets this, and luckily some have read it, but
It doesn't talk about the neighbors, I mean, all those things that put it into
Right,
context.
So I think that, you know, a motion that be sent out to all the businesses.
Why don't you restate what you think Stephen and I said?
Okay.
We'll tell you if you got it right.
And I'm not stuck on that they have to move the guideline, but maybe they should look at that worksheet.
What I've heard, the motion I feel we have on the table is, A, it's important to let council know that we all feel, this council feels, raising the minimum wage in Emeryville is very important, and it should be done as soon as possible. To meet the July 1st target, we would request another simpler 1 or 2 page summary, or even a few of the PowerPoint slides, something be sent out to everyone affected so more public comment can be heard. Third, that the city council provide more opportunities to receive public comment, or circle back with staff since you're getting them, so, you know, obviously you guys always incorporate it anyway, but however that needs to be. I think Michelle's doing better at writing this motion now than me at this
I
point.
think it needs to be formal study sessions, or
Formal
something, not
study
just
sessions.
talk to staff, I mean.
Okay, so additional formal study sessions open to the public.
No, there is a formal study session April 7th.
I don't know that.
I said that.
There is one.
I understand, but I mean, this is all coming fast, right?
It's on the cover letter too.
But he's saying as a general public, you know, that he may not know, they may not know. We need to get it out far.
So it needs to be, and
But more than
potentially-
one is what you're
more
saying.
than one,
Okay.
and they should be notified when you're sending out the simplified, here's what's gonna impact you.
I think
And-
Phil's on the right track. I second or third or fourth his motion.
Is that the entire motion?
No, not yet.
Well, no, then we had one more key issue, which was make our step regionally equivalent. So if we're saying Oakland's at 1225, is Emeryville 1225, or if we want to be a little bit ahead, we're 1250. with the cause that needs to be revisited shortly after. But keep it regional focus instead of trying to make a huge step that imbalances Emeryville compared to the neighbors.
And I'd like to just amend that by also saying initially when you send out these notices to the small businesses, would you just go ahead and change that 10 already to a higher number? Because I think we all agree that a small business should be more than 10 employees, right?
No, the council has to do that.
Yeah.
Well,
If they want to bring that up.
okay, all right.
The council,
Forget it.
the council provided the 10.
Right.
We want to tell them that we think that's too low.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no.
the first one.
Then
So
in the
first
same
motion,
motion,
that was our first one.
Is that your motion that I've amended? Because I feel it covers my amendment.
And does it,
Because
does everyone?
he already seconded, third, and fourth did.
Yeah,
so-
I'm just concerned that we're not making it
We can make another one.
clear enough. No, I just
No.
want to make sure that in that we make it clear enough that we're concerned about the cost of healthcare being part of the minimum wage, that it's not an added to. And if we don't put that in amendment, are they going to look at that? Is council going to look at that as a potential problem? I just want to put that in there.
Okay,
Charlie
so
had something to say.
Charlie,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
You had something to say?
Oh,
You had your hand up.
you raised your hand.
Wait, come on.
All of a sudden you're calling on me. Okay, I agree that probably a simpler mailing is appropriate. Just logistically, I just want to note that the mailing that we did took us about 3 or 4 days. We had to bring in 3 temps each day to stuff envelopes. The postage and the printing cost us thousands of dollars, not to count what the temps cost. So I'm reluctant to do all of that all over again if we don't get it really right this time. And what a thought that occurs to me is something we could do that we've done pretty successfully in the past would be to mail a postcard instead of a package of envelopes that have to be stuffed. And on the postcard, we could have a link to the website where we would then have the summary document that you're looking for. So somebody could just go to the web, click, go to that link, and they'd find the one-page summary.
I don't believe you didn't get it right. I think when there's a dialogue, the fact that you have a first thing and then maybe a follow-up is actually good. It reminds people it's still in discussion and here's more information. Because the one thing is easily just tossed I got your package, Michelle, for this committee, and very similar time I got the thing in the mail, and I took both. And when I looked at it, I was like, well, this is just the legal language that doesn't help me. This was very valuable, so I really spent my time here with your package.
Why in the world would we do this in-house?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we put it out to a mail house, get the packet together, put it out to a
they
mail
print
house?
stuff.
That's
So
nonsense.
you're right.
That's
We'll
nonsense.
figure out logistics.
Okay. So we have the motion, it's been seconded.
And third and fourth.
And third and fourth. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay.
I do want to say one thing though about the mailing, and Sabrina can chime in. So we sent this mailing, the other mailing was sent out because that was what we were directed to do by council. And I don't know that before the April 7th, if we would send out another mailing, because typically we would get approval from council before sort of doing that sort of thing. I don't know.
Well, we know we aren't your bosses, so you have to see if your bosses say
Let's
it's okay.
condense this packet, put it out to a mail house and do it. It's gonna cost money. It breaks my heart. It's gonna cost money.
Well, I think
But it has to be
transparency is
done.
worth investment. I mean, that's what this is, right? This is
Yeah.
public
And
dialogue,
it's a
you're
huge issue.
investigating.
It's a huge
Yeah.
issue
You
that
betcha.
has a lot of ramifications that me as a person who doesn't work here or own a business here, I still understand the cost.
Right.
It could raise my homeowners association if I lived at Watergate, but I live at PPP. But it could raise the things I buy at Farley's. But it also gives people money in their pocket to support the businesses I like here. So, and I don't think people see both sides of that coin all the time. So this is important.
It's a critical issue. We gotta beat the drum, even if it
And I think there was a second sort of recommendation to council, which is readdress small business, and there was
I mean, the size of it.
the size of the small business,
Right.
and readdress the healthcare costs and how is that included?
Do you want that included in your
Yeah.
same?
Yes.
Okay, so I have, let me just read it back. This is what I wrote down. So, that there was a motion made by Stephen, seconded more than once by Bill, or by Jeff.
No, amended by Jeff.
Amended by Jeff.
It doesn't matter. Give
Okay.
Stephen all the glory.
Let's get it moving.
That the Economic Development Advisory Committee believes that it's important to raise the minimum wage as soon as possible, but that another more simple summary should be sent to all Emeryville businesses, that there should be additional opportunities for public comment prior to passage of the ordinance, that the increase in minimum wage should be equivalent on a regional basis, and that the council should include consideration of healthcare and the size for the definition of small business.
You got it. That's my motion.
Okay.
So you already voted, right?
Yes, we passed it.
And that's what you passed?
Yes.
Okay, I just want.
Okay.
We knew there was some cogent secretary here.
Very good. I think it was good work, Michelle.
Yeah, Ken?
Did we have any comment about the tipped employees, or?
So staff is still looking at the issue of tips and how that will work into the minimum wage. So we're still doing some of our background research on that.
Great, that's good.
And I think if you have more dialogue, that gives the opportunity, people who have good information, like direct experience with that, to chime in.
Great.
One last comment on the virtues of boosting the minimum wage. You get a more stable workforce for your businesses, and you get better motivated and better working employees. Productivity gets better. That's statistically true across the board when minimum wages go up a bit. Stable workforces, better workforces, less retraining, that's who's churning through small businesses.
Thanks, Bill. Any staff comments?
Yes, we're looking for a direction on two more issues. One is other exemptions for consideration. So do you want to ask the council, or do you want to make a recommendation to the council, or do you want to ask the council to consider other exemptions such as the ones that are on the board, or other exemptions that you might think of? The second area that we'd like some direction on, some feedback on, is issue that was raised by Tim. Right now, there is an exemption in the draft ordinance for nonprofits, and nonprofits are defined, phase-in, for nonprofits which are defined as a 501c3 corp. Do you want to expand that definition of nonprofit to 501cs in general, some other definition of that?
I would say 501cs in general, and I like the exemptions that you have under the exemptions for consideration.
I would suggest the counter of anyone can apply for a delayed implementation. Any business should be able to apply for delayed implementation, nonprofit or profit. So if it's a small business that doesn't meet, they might be 15 employees but don't meet the 10, then any company can come in that works in town and say, I need the 18 months to implement it instead of just.
And who is the decision maker?
Well, then it goes, I don't know, that's the staff, or you guys are hiring someone to administer this? Not a good point.
If it's phasing in, you got to make it work. If it's phasing in, you're getting there, and every single person will come and ask.
Right? And then that'll just bog down City Hall worse.
Oh, it'll be a horror show. I mean.
All right. So I'm hearing. Wait. So I heard that you, Chair, withdrew your.
I was your mind. Very valid point by Jeff. So
I hear a motion from Stephen that the committee recommend those exemptions and expand the definition of 501s of nonprofits for phase-ins to 501s.
Yes.
Okay.
501c.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Good work. Thank you. All right. With that, any other staff comments?
You mean in general?
In general. We're moving on. We're over time. I want to thank everyone for all the input and the time. But in general, staff comments.
Yes, I have very brief staff comments. There were some revisions to the committee structure that were proposed, I believe, in January 20th, right? That meeting. And since that time, the direction of the council was to move forward with actual implementation of those. And I believe they will be considered at the March 17 City Council meeting. And as that relates to this committee, the recommendation was that this committee move from being a monthly committee to a quarterly committee. And additionally, for all committees, committees will be asked to develop a work plan, an annual work plan with an annual report. And so we wanted to report to you that that is sort of what is ongoing at the council level as part of an overall restructuring of the city committee structure.
So they envisioning the meetings will go longer?
I don't think so.
So we're going to do the work we've done, because we've met every month, practically. We have not canceled meetings, so we have business to do. And that's like in a quarter, that's 3 hours worth of business, and they want us to put that into an hour's work.
Well, we have canceled meetings.
Well, I'm just saying, this group to meet quarterly, we have to do 3 hours worth of work in an hour's time, because we meet every month, and we do
Well,
work
the
every
purpose
month.
of the work plan would help to break that down.
What is the response of the committee to this proposal?
Leave it alone.
I think that's gonna be hard to achieve, to meet quarterly, and to do the work group.
Especially with all of the action that the city council is doing at every meeting. For us to just meet quarterly, it's a little scary.
So is it the consensus of the council, of the committee, that they don't approve of what the council is suggesting?
You don't agree with
And
it,
they don't agree and would like to meet monthly? Is that
We'd
what
like
the
to
Well,
committee
can I
saying?
ask a question, or?
No.
My understanding is that some of this general desire is to relieve what is clearly a lot of pressure on council members and staff to attend 1 million meetings. And so, but having engaged members of the public, I think, is positive. And if all these people are willing to come and get paid for this, what we get paid, why stop us? If there was a way that we could continue meeting without the same burden, that to me would be the best of both worlds. I don't know how to do
Well, and I
that.
think with the work plan, if we can focus it and we don't need to meet, say, 1 month, we can cancel that meeting. But to have that option of meeting, schedule the meeting, meet or cancel it if we don't have the work, we can consolidate that work. But to just say we're gonna meet quarterly, I can't commit to being able to achieve any goals in that period of time.
And then maybe some other committees you can have meet quarterly, like the bike ped committee.
I'm not saying this for all committees, I'm just being
I'm happy to report that the Finance Advisory Committee meets quarterly, but then sometimes our agendas consist of anywhere from 150 to 380 pages.
Really?
So quarterly fits.
Well, there is one thing to consider. We have a kind of a 3-city block here, Oakland, Berkeley, and Emeryville. And Oakland is going full steam ahead on economic development. And Berkeley under Tom Bates is also kind of following what Emeryville kind of started in economic development. We, on the other hand, are falling behind month after month after month in economic development. This is just my perspective. But I see all the glorious things that are happening in Oakland and Berkeley and the really vitality that's there. I don't see it in this city. And
I share that perspective.
I, for one, would appreciate having economic development meet monthly. So that's, but I'm not a member of this committee really, I'm just a liaison.
Well, you were my voice, my mouthpiece.
Well, that's a staff comment that there's looking to be a change.
Well,
Is that-
I would suggest that
We need to make a
somebody
committee comment back to.
show up at the March 17th council meeting when this is discussed by the council before they take their vote, and we can influence the.
Well, I move that Stephen or Philip attend the meeting and speak on, no, I'm serious. I'm moving that we empower Stephen or Philip or both, and all the rest of us, or it's a public meeting, we can go, but we empower one or both of them.
You're assigning us to do it.
To go state that interest in maintaining our monthly engagement as a committee. That's my
Well,
motion.
Stephen, you do it.
And staff can certainly relay that to the full council.
Please relay that to be sure.
I will try to attend.
I
will try to attend.
But I think you had it on the agenda once before and didn't cover it because the meeting got to be too late.
Yeah, I
We
don't
were
want to go.
discussing.
You know what I'll do? I'll bring in Wyatt, the 5-month-old, say, we need to talk about this first, otherwise he's gonna scream.
They took action.
Another meeting.
Ryan.
Did you have any other staff comments, Michelle? Last week we went over well.
I have a card.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Speaking of meetings, I will not be here at the next April meeting, or the meeting scheduled for April. So if it pleases the committee, we would like to cancel that meeting.
We don't really have anything for that agenda, right?
Yeah, we currently don't have anything for that agenda unless the committee members have items that they wish to bring.
All right, so we'll come back to that committee member comments. Does anyone, other issues we want to?
We'll cancel that meeting providing they will give our recommendation to the council to let us meet monthly rather than quarterly.
It's a little pressure.
Canceling
Okay.
meetings.
Any other committee member comments? I think we're fine then with canceling the April meeting. All right, with that, thank you everyone. Thank you all, members of the public, for coming in and commenting.
Thank you, Mario.
And at 1:23 p.m. this Emeryville regular meeting of the Emeryville Economic Development Advisory Committee is adjourned. Thank you.